In the next half hour, we'll be learning about the history of the Milwaukee Letter Carriers Band.
All the band members, I would say, are very enthusiastic. I'm glad to see that.
From Milwaukee Public Television Studio, here's your host, Mark Segrist.
Thank you so much for being with us. We've always known that Milwaukee letter carriers are a tenacious bunch, determined to deliver the mail through all kinds of weather. But did you also know our postal workers have a very rich musical tradition? That's right, dating back to 1918. That's when Milwaukee letter carriers organized their first band, and the tradition continues today. We'll be learning a lot more about that in the next half hour. Bill Berlin is with us in the studio. He currently serves as the Milwaukee Letter Carriers Band Director. Great to have you with us.
Good to be here.
Such a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
Tell us about the early days, and perhaps as a starting point, what prompted organizing this band back in 1918?
Back in those days, the Postal Service, was looking for an outlet for their postal workers as a social activity, and many people in those days played instruments, so they formed bands. It was just a natural way to continue with the social activities, and it just kind of grew from there.
And this was really an outgrowth of the labor movement at the time itself, was it not?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So where do they draw the talent from in the greater community?
Well, as it progressed and as time marched through, they opened it up to family members, because originally it was just for men. And then it was opened up to other family members, and as time marched through, they couldn't maybe fill a chair from the Postal Service ranks, so they would ask, do you know somebody in the community that played the clarinet part? We need that covered tonight. Sure, let's go get Nancy. So they would go find somebody in the community, and that sort of opened the door to get more community people involved.
It really brought up the quality of the orchestra too, I would imagine.
As well. Mm-hmm.
Tell us about the music. Where do they draw the music from, the inspiration from, that sort of thing back then?
The music libraries back then were continually building. And after World War II and after this music strike, there was just a plethora of music available for bands. And that was a big push in our school systems and all the way through the social aspect of our communities. And so the band music library was built through those years. And right now we have so much music that we don't even play. We can't even get through it today, but we still use the library.
I understand your libraries really, the archives are really pretty extensive.
Yes.
Not only in terms of the music sheets itself, but also still pictures from the early days. Tell us about those.
There are a collection of the early days of the bands that they sat around, and it was mostly for their exposure in the community in a marching band setting. So there are many pictures of that.
So the culture of the times really supported the need and the taste for having a band here locally. But how talented was the band itself? I mean, how would you grade it those early years?
Well, and you also have to look at the Milwaukee community. All of the big companies had bands. You know, there was the Pabst band, and there was the several different companies here that had bands. And so this Postal Service was just another place to have music, because that was part of the tradition. And that's why they were able to pull from community members in order to get subs.
What kind of schedule did the early band keep with the postal system? Where would it play?
Typically, their whole objective was to go out to the community, reach out to the retirement communities and the retirement centers and the assisted living, because those people were shut-ins, and they wanted to, the Postal Service saw that this would be an outreach for them, and goodwill, etc. Let's go and have the band play at these facilities.
How large was the group in the early years? Your current group is something like 20 members. How large was it initially?
It's typically like that. Over the years it would flux. Normally you wouldn't see much more than 50, 60 members. That was considered a very large concert band, because you would fill all the chairs. But as time marched on, you just didn't have the numbers to choose from. So you use what you can and what's available.
How diverse was the music, and where did the music come from?
Standard concert band type music. It was a lot of marches, patriotic things. You'd have your waltzes and your polkas and schottisches, the dance style things that were available. And then it would be some Latin flavor. You know, you'd throw in a beguine or a tango, and And just the big band style also was prevalent at the time.
And at times, the band actually did march in the streets, did it not?
Correct.
So it was a pretty diverse group, really. Mm-hmm. Wow, wow. Some of the favorite tunes that come to mind from those early years when you're going through the archives, what are you reading about? What are you seeing?
There are stacks of files of marches and the march folios, because when they did go to parades, they would get another one and another one, and there were donations to the group, and so there are stacks of these smaller folios that the bands would play for marches.
It's got to be exciting to go through that stuff. I know as a director you must love it. Well, we're speaking with director of the Milwaukee Letter Carriers Band, Bill Berlin. He heads up the tradition that began in Milwaukee back in 1918. Let's get some additional perspectives now from other members of the group, local musicians and organizers like Andy Anderson, Bob Dorn, and Gary Levant.
Well, that's probably true. We did have most of the letter carriers at that time, but gradually we needed more players, and we did have to take in some others. If you're short a certain instrument, you need to fill that position somehow or other. So, yeah, it has changed in that regard, yes. Well, a little more than 40 years, about 1965 or approximately that when I started playing with them.
Well, I know for a period of time when I was manager of the band, we took attendance, but that didn't last very long, maybe 3 or 4 years. And oh yes, that was used in reference to if you could go to a convention, depending upon how many rehearsals you attended and how many concerts you attended.
Well, it was when I first started at the post office. I started going to their picnics, and I noticed that they had a band. At that time, I was not really interested. And after my first 2 years, I got drafted, went in the military for 2 years, came back out, and when I finally got assigned to a more or less a permanent station, I don't know if you've heard the name Joe Hauser before from other people that you've interviewed, but he was in the band and a letter carrier, and on his day off, somehow he found out I played an instrument, and he would come and look me up on my route and kind of keep twisting my arm, and this probably went on for 6 months, maybe a little longer. And finally I said, well, okay, I'll come to a rehearsal. And I came to a rehearsal, and it just kept on going.
Well, we have a good variety of music. There's something for everybody. We do it's all concert band rather than dance arrangements, of course. And a lot of show tunes. And, well, we have a few waltzes and polkas in there, and the marches, and something for everybody. That's the name of the game. People that our audience would enjoy, that they remember, in older tunes.
Involved calling the various assisted living places and nursing homes that the previous manager had given me a list of the people, and so I would call the director of recreation at the various nursing homes and assisted living places and set up a schedule. I usually did that in December and January and February, and we usually started playing in April. And when I first started, we rehearsed starting in March every Tuesday night. At the end, we would maybe skip a couple Tuesdays or so, play maybe 2 concerts. We'd rehearse for 3 months or so, and then start a schedule of our concerts, and then maybe play two a month. But we played at nursing homes and assisted living places in Menominee Falls, out in Cedarburg, because they felt that's where I came from, so they'd reciprocate with coming out there. And we played. I really enjoyed doing it because it gave the residents an hour of entertainment.
Well, the whole thing goes back into the Great Depression days of the 30s. My dad was a letter carrier from 1926 until 1966. And he worked out of Station K up on 55th and Center Street. I think they call it Western Station now, but it was letters at that time. And he decided he'd like to try to get into the letter carriers band. So he started from scratch, and he bought a trombone, cost $30, and the teacher would come over to the house. He was a Frenchman, name was Ducille, and he'd always talk about qua notes. He'd never say quarter notes, always qua notes. And anyway, my dad tried real hard on that. He put forth quite an effort. He never quite made it, though. And eventually, he took that trombone and threw it up in the attic one day, and that was the end of that. But then I got to going up there and monkeying around with it. And, well, I guess I succeeded on that where he had failed. Money was tight back in those days. We're talking the Depression, you know. And like he bought that trombone, $30. Well, that was a lot of money at that time. And so I never decided I wanted to play the trombone. I just picked it because it was there. You're not going to go spend money buy new instruments. You got something sitting in your own attic. So that's how that came about.
We're back in the studio now with current Milwaukee Letter Carriers Band Director Bill Berlin. Now, it was really important over the years for the Milwaukee Letter Carriers Band to perform at annual postal conventions where, you know, national membership was there. What were some of those performances like, and how important were they to the band?
Well, from what I'm able to gather, most of the time it was a parade. It was in order to be a part of the convention, they would march down to wherever the convention hall was, and they would have all of the bands marching to represent that particular state or that particular city.
Full
and
marching uniforms?
They had uniforms. Sometimes they would have a shirt. Sometimes they would just have hats. Sometimes it was something like this. Mm-hmm. This is our standard.
You know, as a director, how different is it for you to get your group together for a marching performance versus a stationary performance in a community hall or a larger venue? It's a different mindset, is it not?
It is, and what's interesting about today's group, they're typically can play anything. Mm-hmm. Really blessed to have the talent that we have from the community for us, and if we are called upon to do a parade, I bet we could do it without any problem. Mm-hmm. We have the music. Now it's just a matter of, do you want to march? And when people get older, and I'm one of those, we want to sit on a flatbed truck and pull us through the parade route and still give you the music.
How competitive were those bands, though, on a national level in the early years when you go to convention and a number of bands would be playing from around the country? I mean, there was a lot of pride involved, obviously, huh?
And that's what it reflected. That's what the Postal Service was about, was to kind of show each of the community, each of the cities, each of the states, that they have their own following. They have a band.
Back in the day, which bands, which cities really, had the cream of the crop bands? Was it necessarily the New Yorks, the Chicagos in the group, or, from where you came, did that really matter that much?
Well, from the little investigation I've seen, there aren't a lot of photographs. We couldn't find that many photographs here in Milwaukee, but you'll see the Chicago, you'll see Kansas City, you'll see New York, you'll see Philadelphia, and that's about it.
This was a huge movement, though, really. I mean, you're talking about a pretty good cross-section of America. Back in the day, National Postal Conventions used to feature a variety of bands, as Bill just alluded to, from across the country. But as Gary Levon tells us, the musical offerings have changed in more recent years.
In the mid-'80s, Joe Hauser again asked me, kind of twisted my arm again, if I would be willing to direct the band. And after probably a couple of weeks of discernment, I decided, sure, I'll take a crack at it. I never had, I didn't get to the point in college of reading a score, but I had kind of had an idea of how it worked, and I kind of picked it up, and I was good at following the band, so it worked out pretty well. And yeah, and I directed up through 2008 was my last year. That was the band's last convention that we went to, and I kind of decided that after that convention, I would kind of hang it up and let somebody else take the reins.
Played at San Francisco, played down. The band went to Houston. I was down there, Las Vegas, Chicago, Philadelphia, Atlantic City.
When I first started in the band, the conventions were every 2 years. They still are. The conventions are every 2 years. And when I first started in the band, back in the 70s, I can't remember how many letter carrier bands there were, but there were more than there are now. Now there are 9, I believe. Somebody told me that another one quit or something, that we were down to 8, but I'm not sure of that. But there were probably a dozen bands, if not more. And the convention, the National Union, take all the bands to every convention. So every 2 years, all the bands went, and there was a big parade. They would have a parade in the city, wherever the convention was held. It would be a big parade with all the branches marching down the street and all the bands. And it used to be a really big thing. Well, I think money got kind of tight with the National Union to be bringing all these bands all the time. So then they started bringing half of the bands for one convention and half for the following convention. So now half the bands would be going like every 4 years instead of every 2 years. And now it's got to the point where it's every, probably the last 15, 20 years now, the Milwaukee band, I know there were 9 bands. They were taking 3 at each convention. So it was like every 6 years that our band would go to a convention, which will be coming up now. 2014 should be Milwaukee band's turn to go to the 2014 convention. And I believe that's going to be in Philadelphia again. So it's things are kind of dwindling down, and I'm sure, I don't know what's going to happen with the Postal Service down the road here, the way things are going, but I'm sure, I think in the not too distant future, the Postal Service probably won't be bringing any bands to the conventions anymore. It's just getting expensive to do that, because they do pay. They pay for the bands to travel there to get to the city, and our hotel and that. I can understand that. It was a good time. It was a good time. Music people are good people.
Most of them, of course, are out of the business now. I probably would have stuck with them if they had continued, but the band business is that way. It would go for a few years, and then for various reasons they are discontinued. Thankfully, the letter carriers band has been going for a lot of years after off in 1918. That's a pretty good haul. And it has been fun. It keeps you active, you know. It's sure better than sitting home in the rocking chair.
Make it work.
Yeah. Milwaukee Letter Carriers Band Director Bill Berlin joining us once again here in the studio. I'm excited to learn more about your current band. Tell me about your folks, your musicians.
Well, I'm really blessed to have a neat bunch of people that like to play music. And it shows. They have a history, they have the talent, and they genuinely like to be together. And we love playing for our venue. Our venue typically is the retirement centers, the assisted living centers in and around Milwaukee. We pull musicians from 4 counties, and any given night on a Tuesday night, you'll see us at these places having a ball.
Where are you playing in the greater community? What kind of venues?
It's the retirement centers, the assisted living centers.
Very nice.
People that can't necessarily get out to a concert, so we go to them.
You said that there are some interesting moments. You touch a lot of hearts when you're playing certain tunes and you're reaching out to some of those folks. Tell me about that.
Yeah, music touches people different ways because it sparks a memory. And when you're talking to 70-year-olds, 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds, they've lived a lot of life. And music back in the day was maybe a little more important than it is today, only in that it was live. And that's what we're doing. We're coming to them live, and we're doing the polkas and the waltzes back when they were dancing with their sweethearts. And the big band era, when you were close dancing and not necessarily just listening as a background noise. And so they were live participants, and this is something that touches heartstrings.
You're drawing upon some emotion to some degree when you're performing, aren't
Absolutely.
you? Yeah. What's the biggest challenge of keeping this current group together? Is it financially? Is it just the schedule? Is it drawing on continued talent? As director, what's your biggest challenge?
All of the above. You know, in this economy, people are conscious of the fact that driving in any given place, it might be too far from somebody from Mequon to drive down to Mukwonago. But we do, and we deal with it on a week-to-week basis. We have a roster of 20 to 30 people. If we get 15, 18 on any given night, we've got a great band.
Yeah, a director has to go regardless of what the circumstances are. So let's give a listen now to a recent performance of the Milwaukee Letter Carriers Band. The group was having fun at this particular appearance we recorded. It featured selections like Hello Dolly, Hawaii 5-0, and Jump, Jive, and Wail. Here we go.